To be honest, the English flag isn't just a symbol of racism. It may be the primary symbol of racism in this country because of how it's been adopted and co-opted by the far right. In my mum's generation, it was keep Britain white and being chased down the street, being called a monkey. In my generation, it was a National Front telling me to go home. And now you've got the EDL, BNP, and all these other groups, right? And to be fair, if the same people who are hurling out all this abuse are waving this flag, have it tattooed on their chest, then what else could it possibly be?
Well, because, I mean, let me throw something back at you. When I grew up, I remember massive street parties for the Queen's, anniversaries, for example, Silver Jubilee and so on, where everyone would bring out their St George's flag with great pride about their country. So it's had a double meaning. It may have been misappropriated by people who have nefarious reasons to do so. But fundamentally, it remains the flag of this country.
If I see that flag on a pub and I'm going, and it's not the football time, that means no go. That means no go today is the same way it did 10 years ago.
All right,
in many ways, it's like the Confederate flag. It's like, that's our version.
Well, it's an interesting comparison, except that Nigel Farage, the problem with this is St George is our patron saint. I mean, he is the English patron saint.
We've been through all this before. Back in the 1970s, you'll remember that the National Front adopted the Union Jack as their symbol. And everybody said, we mustn't fly the Union Jack, it's a symbol of racism. And actually, collectively, people said, two fingers up to that, we are going to fly the flag, we will take it back for ourselves. And you know what? The Union Jack is now a global symbol. You see kids in America wearing T-shirts with Union Jacks on it. It's exactly the same with this flag. If there is a feeling in some communities, and you say that, and I'm not disbelieving you, but if there is that feeling, well, let's claim it back. I mean, look, I'm wearing those today. Nothing wrong with that, is there?
What do you mean? The fact that St George isn't even English, Nigel.
Yeah, I know.
He was born in Greece.
Apparently never even came to England.
But it's
in
a symbol,
part that is now part of Turkey.
Nigel Farage, why? It's a great question for you. Why would you want a foreigner who's never been near,
I didn't choose
never
it.
Been
I didn't choose it. I was just born into this.
Why is St George your hero?
Well, he is a symbol, isn't he, of standing up.
He's Turkish.
Defending right.
Turkish.
Well, there are good people from all over the world.
During the
referendum,
Jesus wasn't English, and I still go to church, all right?
During the referendum, you warned us about people coming from Turkey. But St George is your hero.
I warned about millions coming from Turkey, but not...
But it was just the one, just the one you wanted.
I think that's the problem as well. This flag has been used by the right and also by people like Nigel to push an image of Englishness which is exclusive. There's a reason why the vast majority of ethnic minorities in this country would never call themselves English.
This is
but in Scotland, the vast majority would call themselves Scottish. I don't think it's changed as much as you think.
About flags and appropriation and extremism. Just think what's been done in the name of Irish nationalism. Some pretty awful things over the course of the last, 30 years of troubles. And yet, that doesn't stop people on St Patrick's Day using the Irish flag. And we've got to adopt exactly the same argument.
You can't do exactly the same because we're talking about literally hundreds of years of history of Englishness, even go back to the Crusades.
But how should there will be English people watching this in their droves, and I've already seen the comments, who feel very angry about this. They believe this is the flag of England and it should be celebrated. And if a few idiots are misusing it, and I don't doubt, by the way, at all what you're saying, I've seen it and I know you're right. But that doesn't mean that most people actually don't use it for the right reason. Why should they have to surrender?
Can it be taken
the flag
back?
of it?
No.
Well,
can it be taken back?
It's not about. Is it about?
Let me give it a different phrase. Why should they have to give up their flag as they see it?
What we have to
simply for a few idiots.
It's not just it's not just a few idiots. This is far more widespread than just a few idiots, and it doesn't impact on a daily basis. This flag. Two, I think you have to understand what Englishness is, and we have to have a proper conversation.
What do you think it is?
Well, there's some good parts, but there's also some very bad parts, right? If you look at colonialism, look at slavery, look at these things, and you can't just say, well, let's wrap up the flag and say it's all great. There's a reason why the far right picked this flag, and it's not.
And what do you think
very
that
comfortable discussion because actually, for a lot of people in England, being English is being white. And that's why someone like me would never say I'm English.
Same arguments.
Because we feel cut out of it.
We had the same arguments over the Union Jack 40 years ago when we were told not to. I remember at school being told, don't display that flag, it's awful. And actually, we've won that battle.
We haven't?
Nigel,
big time.
This raises another interesting point. Let's turn to the Windrush scandal, OK? Here you have a lot of black people from the Caribbean who were brought here in the 50s, 60s, 70s.
Now being told they're
now
not
being
English.
told actually they're not English.
It's an administrative.
Doesn't matter how many flags they wave. But part of the problem.
It's a huge admin cock.
Or is it
But
institutionally racist?
Or
No,
actually?
of course it's not.
It's not, really?
Of course
Are you
not.
sure?
We've got millions of people have settled in this country. We've got a few thousand. We don't know yet, but a few thousand cases here. This is a pure administrative error, and frankly,
But it was driven
whether
by,
it happened.
But it was driven by a philosophy of creating a hostile environment.
Well, was it?
For illegal immigration.
Well, actually, the cards were destroyed in 2009
That's not the
when a
problem.
Labour
No,
government.
I don't
not the
dispute that.
All right,
I'm not
so-
actually saying it's a Tory problem, but there's no doubt that when Theresa May became Home Secretary, she doubled, trebled, quadrupled down on this and ran a very, very tough hard line with the van saying go home.
I remember.
And so on.
The Conservatives were running
What did you
scared of
make of that,
UKIP.
though?
That's my
Should we have
personal
vans showing around communities?
No, I was.
saying go home?
I actually said at the time, I think this is over the top and wrong. Of course, we want to stop illegal immigration. We need to do a lot more. There's roughly 150 people a day still getting in lorries across, through the Channel Tunnel.
But
So there is
these-
work
this
to
is
do.
the problem.
But the
This is the
Windrush
problem.
thing, the idea that this is some deliberate policy that there's been against black people, frankly, is not.
No,
What's
because you
Andrew's
can't say
final
it's
word?
It's an admin
No,
error.
but this is the point. It's not an admin error. When you create this hostile environment, this is what happens. And I guarantee a lot of those people who have been deported or lost their jobs, they're probably feel the most English out of everybody.
Right.
Yes.
It didn't do them any good, did it? Because they've been.
You know what?
All these
It's,
Well, how many have been deported?
we don't know the numbers.
We
which
don't
is terrible,
know.
actually.
Well,
Which is actually-
well,
but
well,
this is not a
well,
new
you
thing.
can
This has
bet
been
your
happening
life.
for years.
You can bet your life
This
it's
has been
hardly
go-
anyone.
No,
This has
but
been
Nigel,
going on for
sorry,
years.
sorry, can I-
This has been going on
This
for
will be
years, and it is
sorted out.
Okay, but
And I give the floor to Mr. Farage, chair of the Europe of Freedom and Direct Democracy Group.
Mr. Zuckerberg, I'm the largest user of Facebook in all the EU institutions in terms of followers, in terms of engagement, so I'm your best client here in the room. I've no idea of the value of that, but I'm pleased to see you, as I hope you are me. The one slight problem I have, and I'm watching very carefully the testimony that you gave on Capitol Hill. Time and again, people asked you, is this genuinely a neutral political platform? And you come up with the same line again and again. It's well crafted. You say that Facebook is a platform for all ideas. Now, historically, of course, it's true that through Facebook and other forms of social media, there is no way that Brexit or Trump or the Italian elections could ever possibly have happened. It was social media that allowed people to get round the back of mainstream media. Now, perhaps you're horrified by this creation of yours and what it's led to. I don't know. But what is absolutely true is that since January of this year, you've changed your modus operandi, you've changed your algorithms, and it has led directly to a very substantial drop in views and engagements for those that have got right of centre political opinions. The facts are very clear. Just look at President Trump's numbers on a much smaller scale. Look at mine. Look at thousands of other conservative commentators. And on average, we're down about 25% over the course of this year. And, that's happening on a platform for all ideas. I am not talking here, Mr. Zuckerberg, about extremism. I'm not talking about encouraging violence. I'm not talking about hatred of anybody. I'm talking about people who have majority mainstream opinions, and frankly, I feel they are being willfully discriminated against. What interests me is who decides what is acceptable? Who are these people you referred to earlier, these third-party fact-checkers? Who are these people? I mean, why is there no transparency in this process at all? I'm not generally somebody that calls for legislation on the international stage, but I'm beginning to wonder whether we need a social media Bill of Rights to basically protect free speech. And I'm asking you today very, very clearly that would you accept that today Facebook is not a platform for all ideas that is operated impartially?
Let me see if there's anything else that is important to touch on. There were a couple of questions about political bias that I want to touch on, because I think that this is a very important topic. As a couple of you mentioned, we are committed to being a platform for all ideas. That means that we want to make it so that people can come to our service and share any idea across the political spectrum. It's very important to me that we're a service that allows for a wide variety of political discourse. We view that as a big part of our responsibility, and I can commit to you here today that we have never and will not make decisions about what content is allowed or how we do ranking on the basis of a political orientation. So that's an important philosophical point for me that I'm proud to be able to commit to. There was a specific point around distribution and reduction of seeing people's content, and on that, what I'd just say is we've made a number of changes this year to make sure that we're showing people's friends and family and community content more than public content in general. So a lot of the feedback that we've heard from people is that they come to Facebook because they want to stay connected to people. We've also done a lot of well-being research. This wasn't a topic that came up today, but we're very focused on making sure that people's use of technology is good for people's well-being and is not taking away from it in some way. And all the research that we have shows that when you're using the internet to stay connected to people that you care about, that's good for your well-being. It's correlated with measures like increased measures of health and happiness and feeling more connected and less alone over time. But when you're just using Facebook or the internet overall to read news or passively consume videos, that isn't correlated with those same benefits to well-being. So because of that and because of feedback that we've received, we've made a number of shifts to the services to promote connecting with people's friends and family and communities more than public content. So that has led to reductions in distribution for public content, video, news.
New values. I'm always hearing about human rights, democracy and the rule of law, and yet in 2011, when journalists in Poland were being apprehended, held and sacked for being critical of the government, what did the European Commission do? Nothing. Why? Well, of course, because Mr. Tusk, as Prime Minister, was pro the European Union. But when you get law and justice in power, who are critical of the European Union, just because they try to clear out the communist old guard and modernise their system, here you are on the verge of invoking Article 7 and taking away their democratic rights within the Union. And of course, it's the same story in Hungary, where Viktor Orban, quite rightly, refuses to accept your ludicrous migrant quota programme, and he is now cast as the devil. Perhaps the real reason is that he's taking on Soros, perhaps the most dangerous man in Western democracy today. Keep going, Viktor Orban, is all that Free Democrats can say. And you're happy to interfere in every single member state where you think you see an infringement, apart from, oh, I'd nearly forgotten, Catalonia. 950 people get beaten up by the police because they want to turn out on a Sunday morning and express an opinion, a totally clear violation, Mr. Timmons, of people's human rights, an absolute abuse of any sense of a democratic process, and yet you say in that case it's none of our business. But of course, they're a pro-EU government, so the iron fist of the European Union is reserved purely for your critics. You said today you hoped that the United Kingdom would change its mind and reverse Brexit. Well, looking at the way you're treating Poland, I would have thought the answer must be a very big no. This, for Poland, is the modern-day Brezhnev